What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we are back on the desert island. We're going to be talking some comics, and I'm joined by one of the Launchpad roomies, Matt from Launchpad Podcast. How are you doing, Matt? You okay?
Dude, I'm so excited to be here. And I love the way you say roomies. It's so fun to hear roomie said in different languages and different accents. So we've been pals for a while, and I'm very excited to be here. Like, I honestly take this as an honor.
No, well, yeah, you guys came on like way back when, like quite a while back. We talked about we've talked about horror films and all other bits and pieces, and I've been on the Launchpad many years ago, so it's great to have you finally back on now doing this as well and talking Desert Island comics. And this is you just before we started, you have voiced the torture that I seem to be putting on people for this.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, I'm writing an essay for you for something different. I am entrusted with the lives of children almost every single day. I have my own kid. I have financial worries and, my own show to worry about. In the last month, have not spent more time thinking about anything. And it's like, and I guess we'll talk about it, but like pretty much two of my pulls for this, I got them pretty quickly. But that last one, it was like Sophie's choice of like, dude, you're going to be on an island with one issue. What are you going to take? And I was like, I purposely didn't write you right away because I had 4 or 5. I read them. I thought about them. I spent the night with each one,
romancing them, teasing them out, seeing which one you want to spend time with.
They were teasing me, man.
Yeah. No, this seems to be this now seems to be the course. Every time I've done this, everyone I've done this with has said the same thing. They're always coming back and like, that's the thing. It's like, oh man, yeah, the first 1 or 2 seem to come easy because it's like, oh yeah, that's one I've got to talk about. That's one. And then they're like, I've only got one left. And there are so many to choose from. So everyone always wants to come back and be like, yeah, this was torture. So, but you did choose. You managed to whittle it down to 3 single issues. Whew. So what issues are we going to talk about today?
All right. So we're going to talk about Watchmen issue 11. We're going to talk about Punisher Max. And if I was a better guest, I would have looked up the volume, but it's Punisher Max. It's the series Afterborn that Garth Ennis did with La Rosa did the pencils and Palmer did the inks on. And we'll do issue 1 of that one.
Yes.
And then we'll do the last one will be Ultimate Spider-Man issue 131.
Yes.
Which is still written by Bendis, but then it's when the new art gets taken over. It's so good.
It's an interesting book because that's one of the things, like, the first 2, like, I've read Watchmen a number of times. Punisher Max is one of my sort of like favorite series. To admit, I've never read all of Ultimate Spider-Man. Like, I've read the first couple of volumes. I think I've read the first sort of like 40 issues and never got beyond that. And also the one, 131 is part of Ultimatum. And by that point within the Ultimate Universe, like, I was a bit like, I'm done. So I'm like,
sure.
I sort of
and you're not
off.
the only person that thought that. I totally hear that.
So it's interesting to go back and actually go, oh, actually, this one, for everything I've heard, like, this is actually pretty good. It's not so bad. But we are kicking off with a bit of a heavyweight. Like, people, I think some of the others have been other people have had on this have been a little scared of picking an Alan Moore, like a Watchmen or whatever. I know someone previously was dabbling with Swamp Thing. But to dig into this, but like I say, and also the issue you picked, not the first issue, not the last issue, and not issue 5, is it the one that's sort of the mirror issue that sort of represents?
Sure.
So you've gone for issue 11. So why issue 11 then?
Okay, there's a lot of reasons, all right? And to speak to what you just said about whether you pick Watchmen to bring on that plane that's going to crash on this island.
Yeah.
My immediate thought was absolutely. You got to bring Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns or Mouse, one of the top 3 or 4. But then I was like, wait a minute, you're stuck on an island for however long with this comic. So I was like, Watchmen, if you really think about it, is depressing as shit.
Yeah.
Like sorry, are we allowed to curse on here? I meant to ask you before.
Fuck it. Yeah, go for it.
As shit. Well, it's depressing, right? I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, and this leads into why I picked 11. I'm an Ozymandias fan. I kind of feel where he's coming from. I don't necessarily agree with every action he takes, but I love that character of, I'm going to put the burden of everything on my back and make the hard choices. Like in war movies and stuff, there's always that character. Star Trek, right? The needs of the many. I love that trope and that concept in any sort of literature or art or entertainment. But I immediately was like, no, Watchmen's a downer, man. I'm not going to read the same comic on an island. I want to kill myself. Then as I was searching through other books to talk with you about, I kind of came back to it and I thought about it. And issue 11 holds special significance to me. This is the cover of issue 11 on this shirt, right? I'll bury the punch. I'll bury the lead for a minute. But that issue for me is incredible. And when I first read Watchmen, I was working in film and I was based in Los Angeles and I was flying to different places, but like last minute and for a week and then coming back and then for 2 weeks and then coming back. So I was trying to read novels, couldn't get through them because it was too much start and stop. So I was like, oh, I'll read a comic. And this was before I ever really was interested in comics. I really didn't get into comics until I was an adult. So I was like, what's the comic to go to? Watchmen? Okay. And I was able to read pretty much right up to issue 11 and then didn't travel for a minute. So I didn't get it for a while. And I ended up traveling without my copy, went to a Barnes and Nobles and read it on the floor. Maybe it was a Borders, but I remember like reading it, like a shady hobo in the store. And when you read that issue and you're like, oh my goodness, one of the main characters, one of these guys' friends is the villain of the series, so to speak. It is a really good reveal that I didn't see coming. And then you have that baller Watchmen scene where they're like, Adrian, we have to try everything we could do to stop you. And he's like, stop me. Yeah. You'd think this is a serial novel. Yeah. I wouldn't, you think I would tell you my whole plan? And I remember I saw as that, monologue was, or I guess dialogue was going, where he's saying, do you think I would lay out my plan step by step if there was any hope that you could stop me? I did it 35 minutes ago. And I knew as he was getting there, I knew he was going to say it's already done. But when he said, I'm getting goosebumps now just talking about it. But it's like, wow. Yeah. Wow. And I remember being like, holy shit. And that to me is actually the fulcrum of that book. Even though there's multiple points where you are supposed to either relate or not relate with different characters and decisions. I mean, to me, that was that Vertigo shot where like they were, zooming out and also panning out. It was...
Yeah, but the Jaws one, so you zoom out, but it's
exactly. And that to me was like, I felt that sitting in that bookstore reading that issue,
No, I read it earlier and I was going through it, and you're right. And one of the things you say about it being that sort of like the fulcrum, the turning point, it's one of those ones that like the cliche is that would be the finale, that this thing would be the finale. They would give the plan and then sort of, these characters, the hero characters would come in, save the day, and everyone would be happy and survive and sort of so on and so forth. But the fact is, like, it's not even a delaying tactic. It's not like he's trying to delay them. He literally is like, oh, it's done. I'm just telling you because
you see him do it in that issue. You see him plug it in, and there's no dialogue, there's no bubbles, there's no captions, there's no writing in that whole page. It's just a wordless page where he does it. And if you've read it before, that's what he's doing. And there's a clock in the corner, and you can see that alludes to but it's unreal. I mean. Wow.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's the thing. It's one of those things that hit me about this issue, because obviously it flips between two scenarios or two locations, and so you have got like Vite in the in the Arctic, and it's sort of all that's going on there. which is the main plot. The main sort of like, I won't say superhero plot, but let's say the Mystery Men plot.
Yeah.
And then it keeps going back to this sort of like the corner, this street corner in New York where stuff's going down. You got the newspaper vendor, the little kid reading the sort of the pirate comics, the couple, the lesbian couple that's sort of, breaking up, the doctor that's been looking after Rorschach, him and his wife, and all this other stuff. And so you get this sort of this accumulation, of humanity sort of growing on this street corner. And they act like the thing I find with this issue is the stuff with Veidt and it's sort of like he's given his origin story almost. He sort of says like how he came to that decision point, but that's not the tension, because you sort of know he's up to something. This is like the picks up.
Right.
And in reading this as I've grown older, I realize that the tension is actually on the street corner, because something's coming.
Right.
And you're watching this street corner and going like, well, why are they showing me these people? Like, I know something's coming.
Right.
Like,
and it's very hard to see where it's going until the end of that.
Yeah.
Because the way those people start slamming into each other, both physically and metaphorically, you kind of can't plot where that trajectory is going. You don't know why all that action starts happening on that street corner, right? No,
exactly. Look, there's three key, there's three sort of like main independent interactions going on, and as they sort of grow, and one of it's the newspaper vendor that's like, he's the sort of almost I don't know, the moral conscience, because he's a bit of a dick as well, but he's basically sort of saying like, everyone's fighting, like the more there's tension, the more people seem to be fighting. And he's sort of like, he is obviously like voicing, he's almost getting to the same point as Ozymandias. But he's like, well, no, we should just we need to get on. We need to join. We need to be more unified. Why are people fighting? And he's like, that sort of like old man philosophical character that you've seen before. But he can't reach the same point as Ozymandias. In the background, Ozzy's gone like, yeah, well, I've got an answer. And unfortunately, like, you're all for it. And so when you get to that final page, and then you said, because the reveal is the first bit, and then you see sort of like the Rorschach and what's its reaction. And then the next page is just happening. And then in the final page is sort of it goes to white, but you see the newspaper vendor and the kid read the comics sort of like grab and hug, and you're like, that's the...
Right. And what a beautiful image. Like, that's an image that gives me goosebumps and kind of chokes me up. And again, if you're reading that issue, that book, the series, even for the first time, you don't know what that white is. And there's many allusions prior about nuclear holocaust and nuclear explosions leading to that sort of image. We've seen that multiple times in the book. So you're assuming there was some sort of explosion, and it's not good, right? Whatever it is, because it looks like they start to explode or kind of rip apart. But I love the interaction and the foil back and forth between those two stories. But there's actually a third story there as well, because you have young Bernard, the comic reader, is reading the end of the Black Ship comic book, right?
Yes.
And he gets to the end of that. Now, the Black Sail comic book, like I personally go hot and cold on it. Sometimes I think it's really important. Sometimes I don't. And I probably read Watchmen once every year or two. Sometimes I read that. Sometimes I blow through it. When I'm reading this issue on my desert island, right, it for sure is important, because it's one of those things, as I'm reading it last night, and I do this every time I pick up a Watchmen book, I notice things that I didn't notice before. That last installment for us of that comic book is almost like a mirror of Ozymandias's thing, or at least a foreshadowing, because that journey is about this guy who's trying to get home to save his family from imminent doom.
Yes.
So he needs to get somewhere and do this thing to save innocents that he cares about, right? And he ends up getting on, in the previous book, he gets on shore and he ends up killing a couple that he, in his overzealous state, he assumes they're pirates. He kills them, but they're innocent. He gets home and he almost kills his wife. And he realizes at that moment, holy shit, does the ends justify the mean? Did I push too far? And did I let my zeal and my lust for action taint the reality of the situation? Now, when you then read the rest of issue 11 as well as issue 12, you can put Ozymandias in that exact same spot, because I could have a 4-hour conversation with you whether I think Ozymandias did the right thing or not in this series. And I honestly don't know if I know the answer to that. I just know that's a deep fucking question that you can kind of really make the argument for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I think even, Alan Moore has said things about this book, and some of the characters. Like, he has definitive thoughts on some of the characters and some of the thoughts. Sure. And then he has made it clear, like, there are other bits where he's like, yeah, I wrote it, but I'm not even sure, like, what it should be. And it's the last panel. Like, I've actually got it here. So the last panel of the comic, the pirate comic the kid's reading. Because also I like the fact that the newspaper vendor actually asks him, he says, why do you keep coming back and reading this same thing again? And his first response is like, yeah, I have to keep reading it. It doesn't make any sense. Like, I can't make head nor tail of it, which is interesting, having had to read through it for 11 issues. Right. But the final panel is like the mariner is sort of reaching out for a rope to pull himself up onto this the black ship, this sort of like ominous ship that's been there. Like, he's retreated to the sea from his, have you said, like, attacking his wife and stuff. And it says, the world I tried to save was lost beyond all recall. I was a horror amongst horrors. Amongst horrors must I dwell. A rope snaked down, spluttering, I grabbed it. And from the decks above, a cheer went up, both gross and black, its stench affronting heaven. And like you say, this is it. Like, this is this question now to Ozymandias is sort of like, look, what you think what you're doing is good. You have it as almost like the worst thing to do for the best possible intentions. But like you say, do the ends just for the means? Has he become the horrors that he's actually trying to prevent and actually trying to sort of like, defeat, as it were?
And the beauty of this book is then you read the next issue, and even he, in my opinion, even he is not sure, because then he asks John, he said, I did this for the right reasons and I did the right thing. And he even asks John, he's like, right, John?
Yeah.
And John doesn't answer. And you're like, oh, like even Ozymandias, who the whole book has been like, I am right. And this is tough. And he says, I felt every death. And I believe that. But even he is a man. He's the smartest man in the world, but he's still a man, right? He's still going to lose sleep over that. I think that's just fantastic.
Yeah. I love the way he sort of, because one of the interesting things about Ozymandias throughout the whole book, but even in this issue, especially in this issue, is the sort of the dichotomy of who he is, of what he is. Because you see that, like you said, like the ends just for the means, or sort of like, sacrifice the few to save the many kind of thing. But like you say, he acknowledges this whole plan is to save people. It's for the best possible intentions. Yet there's almost like a callousness as well to the way he kills those 3 scientists that have helped him, obviously.
Sure, yeah.
He drugs them and leaves them to the sort of the elements. Like, he kills his tropical garden, and it's
and refers to it as a reward. He tells them, "I'm shamed that I don't have a better reward for you."
Yeah, and it's almost like it is. It's I'm not say psychotic, but it's callous in that way of like, look, you've done this work for me, and I'm going to kill you off to keep my secret. But it's calculated, I think, is the only way to sort of, the way I think about it. And so it's that logical, it's that Spock kind of approach, isn't it? They're like, well, logic is this, but but then if you overlay emotion onto that, like, it doesn't always calculate correctly.
I mean, it's so cool. And like, I mean, how many times do you think you've read Watchmen?
Oh, at least, yes, 6, 7.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, every couple of years I'll pick it up again, and damned if I don't find at least one significant thing. Like last night, I'm rereading this issue again for the umpteenth time, and I noticed, and this is a little bit of a segue into why I chose this as a desert island comic. He is in love with Alexander the Great, right? He kind of envies Alexander the Great. He looks up to him, and he says something like, he is one of the he is the only human that I feel any fraternity with. I'm paraphrasing, but he makes a claim like that, and it shows you how isolated and alone he is as a character in his contemporary world. And the only person he feels any kinship with is dead for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And he said, he does this whole flashback or, interlaced flashback where he says, I gave away my fortune to show that I didn't need money and I didn't want to be preoccupied with money. I followed Alexander the Great's triumphs around. I even did some things that he couldn't do. That to me is amazing. I noticed last night in all those flashback panels, you never see Ozymandias' face. It's always Adrian's back.
Yes.
And I noticed that. And I thought that was pretty interesting, right? And it's got to be on purpose. I just thought that was really cool. It said either way, whether it was done on accident or on purpose, it's fun to think about. It's fun to think about what the significance of that is, or at least how it makes you, the reader, feel, right?
Well, more than that, I think you are right, because nothing is coincidental with Alan Moore.
Right.
More than that, I'm looking at the panels now, because it's more than just his back, because it's always like that 9-panel grid, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah.
Mostly, they'll usually have like a block one. It's actually him center panel in shadow, not just his back. It's in shadow. It's a silhouette every time.
You're right. Yeah.
And they slightly adjust the silhouette to accentuate. So he's a child. He's at the grave. He then sort of traveling the world, doing these things. The last one, which is really interesting, as you sort of say, because he's traveling around Egypt. The last one is him adorning himself with the Ozymandias costume.
And that's the only one that looks slightly different, right?
Yeah, and that's where it's sort of like there's more color and stuff added into him. The silhouette is no longer just a silhouette. It's actually got color and some slight color into it. So, no, I think you're right. Like this is, it's there to depict. Because what I would say is, they're all black and white, or they're all black. He is black until he actually has the one where he has the trip. And he says, he took what was it? He went to the desert and ate a ball of hashish. I'd been given but in Tibet, and he has this vision of talking to the gods and the wind and all this other stuff. And that's where it transitions to color with him, and then the one of him put the costume on. So no, you're right. It is like this thing of like
so cool.
Yeah, him being able to this journey is what makes him realize who he is to be, and who he is to become.
That factored a lot into my decision to put to bring this to the island, because the good news or hard news is I know that you're stranding me on an island in this situation. So like I'm packing for that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And honestly, I was like, well, like part of me was like, shouldn't I put a like survival comic in there? Like something that specifically talks about like how to make fire and shit in the jungle. So I tried not to think about it like that. However, if I'm going to have something to escape to learn from, to entertain myself, I also was trying to pick something that had an undercurrent of not necessarily heroicism, but in this case, put your fucking boots on and get going. And he wanted to be essentially the best. Like this issue is about him being the best human he can be. And he literally throws off the trappings of humanity to be the man he wants to be. And I felt like, okay, if I was crying on an island because I didn't have any food and shit like that, that might be an inspirational, motivational type of thing that I could be like, all right, if this fictional character that was never actually alive, blah, blah, blah. But like, okay, I can get my shit together. And I have more than one pick on this list that is like that. But this for me is like, I really like that he is able to detach himself from his emotions and his feelings enough to be like, what does this job need? What needs to happen? And if my ass is stranded on an island, I need a little bit of that kind of thought process in my head.
No, it is. I think that's a really good point, actually. I'd say, because, if anything, Ozzy is sort of like, he's dedicated to the cause. Like he's committed to the cause. Like he's going to do it, whatever it takes. And he'll is he inspirational? I don't think he's aspirational, but like you say, there's an element of inspiration of like, if you were to say, I'm going to be committed to doing this, and I'm going to have that drive and that goal. So yeah, it's you do when when you see people at the top of their game, like athletes or sort of like performers, and you do hear the story of like they committed to this. They spent hours rehearsing and hours training. You go, yeah, right, fair play. Like you really, you're that sort of story that you want to hear. So I can see it from that sort of point of view. They don't get to kill the world, but
Right. I mean, I'm going to be on an island by myself, so I probably won't be able to do that much killing. But
the one thing I would say is that's interesting is because this book obviously sort of is a deconstruction of the super heroic sort of comics up until this sort of point, the mid 80s. This issue though also is you say about the fulcrum. To me, reading this, it was also the fulcrum of that theme because you sort of have I keep calling him Owlman. I can't remember what is
Night Owl.
Night Owl. Thank you. It went out of my head then completely. And Rorschach obviously approaching this Arctic base, this sort of like villainous looking thing. That it can't be. If you're going to be a Bond villain, this is sort of like going to have it in some obscure place on the world. But it has all the trappings of them doing it, and as the story unfolds. Like Rorschach attempts to attack him from behind, and it's sort of like clear that that's a complete waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to take him down. He then just basically outlays this whole thing of like everything you're doing is pointless,
right?
And he explains, everything you're doing is puerile and silly. I thought it was possible at one point, but no, I elevated above. And even like the comedian, he's like, no, once the comedian realized what I was doing, like even he knew that
what can you do?
Yeah, exactly. What's he going to do? What's the place for people like that? And so it's, and that's what I think the beauty of this book overall is it proposes that question of like, yeah, super heroics really are just is almost like a status quo. It doesn't solve anything, and Ozymandias is looking to create an actual solution. But as you sort of said before, like, but you have to be brave enough to then carry the burden of making the decision to actually fulfill that solution. So yeah, this issue does feel like the real true gut punch of the book.
Yeah, for sure it is for me. And it's always been one of my favorite issues. Like I said, when I read it, I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't even into comics. So my first read probably didn't impact me as deeply as my later reads, because then I started to know more comic tropes. I started to know more modular characters and stuff, and started to understand more of what this book is poking fun at, satirizing, turning on its head. But I certainly knew enough about it when I read it to feel this, to feel that last 4 pages. God, like my wife, who knows nothing about anything cool, with the possibility of me, the possible exception of me, she would understand that, like, oh shit, he's a supervillain that already did the shit that he's jibber jabbering about. And it's like, I'm sure that's been done after, maybe it's been done before, but never so eloquently for sure. And certainly not in, like you said, a gut punch where you're the reader like, oh shit. And at that point, we don't even know what he did. Right? Yeah. Because at that point, we don't know what it is. Well, he explains it was that he was made a monster, and he does explain what would happen, but we don't quite understand the ramifications, or let alone the visuals of what that would. Yeah.
All he says is like, we've invented teleportation, but everything explodes. But then we created this monster, and that's going to explode. And all you sort of go is like, right, so it's going to be an explosion. So you're thinking like, oh, boom, that seems to be enough. But like that last page, you're like, oh, this is more than an explosion. Like this is, and that, one thing I'd say is, this was what 86,
I think.
Yeah, 86. Those final images, those final images of the sort of, you said they're being sort of vaporized. It goes to white, like just white light. This thing. Some years later, reading it now in retrospect, like I'm sure, I don't know, it feels a bit like the Terminator 2 vision that Sarah Connor has, where she's watching the play when that nuclear blast goes off, and it's all like, that's a bit more graphic, but like it has that impact where I'm just like, this is sort of like that destructive. One thing I want to say just to sort of throw it out there, because we're talking about the writing and stuff, but it's you can't talk about this without talking about Dave Gibbons' art.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And I was curious. I was interested to see what you think, because his sort of clean line work on this and just the way he does this book is so effective. And again, like this, this for me, because it's so clean and sort of, it feels grounded. Like it never feels, bombastic in any way.
Sure.
And that sort of lack of bombast sort of gives more to the gut punch, because it's not sort of like, Frank Miller sort of like dramatic, massive muscles and sort of like big lines or anything like. It's controlled, and it's sort of like, a bit more him, and like I often akin to him to like Brian Bolland, that sort of style of art. But what were you going to say about the art then? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's the way you described it as not bombastic is great. I mean, look at the cover, right? This is the cover of the shirt.
Mm.
The cover of the shirt. That's the cover of the issue.
Is the butterfly, yeah.
It's like what? And it's the butterfly. We know that this is a snow dome, or a glass dome, atrium that is covered by snow, and this is just a glimpse into it. You don't know that until you start reading it. But like, unless you've read the other issues, you don't have a context. But if I saw this book, I might not pick it up, but I might look at it, and if I saw the cover, I'd be like, "The fuck is that book about?" Right?
Yeah.
Like, it stops me. It makes me think. I don't hate the movie. I don't think the movie's great, but I don't think you can make a really good film of this. Maybe a TV series, like a mini series. But part of the problem is a lot of this book is superheroes standing around talking.
Yes.
And that's not bad when you have Alan Moore's writing with Dave Gibbons' art, because Gibbons' art makes that believable. And like you said, if they were posing the whole time, it wouldn't feel right. If they were having those conversations while stopping crimes, which the movie has them do for a scene, it doesn't feel right, because it's two different worlds. Gibbons is more than just an artist. He's a storyteller.
Yes.
And I feel like any good visual artist is that. But when you look at a book like this, like you mentioned issue number 5 with the symmetry, like to plot out panels by panels like that, to have so many callbacks in this 12-issue series that goes back and forth, where you're like, on my 7th read, I'm like, wait a minute, that's a direct parallel to an image I saw, and you're like, holy shit, this really is genius. Like, it really is. This is one of those things, and I hate to like subscribe to something everyone already is subscribed to, but this is one of those books that I personally don't think could get enough credit. It deserves, in my opinion, almost every accolade and every praise that it gets, because every time I read it, I'm astounded and I'm wowed. And sometimes it's the words, sometimes it's the images, sometimes it's just the plotting. I mean, it's just fantastic. And it is, we all know this art, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's iconic. I mean, some of the images in this have become iconic, haven't they? That's the thing. It's that thing of like, but one of the things as well is, like, say, it's even like just the attention to detail. You mentioned the sort of the cover, the sort of the thing with the butterfly on, and again, you could be like, oh, okay, well, we're going to just do this and whatever. But as you sort of like, even looking at that, you're like, no, it's really well done. It's beautifully drawn just for this single sort of image. And like, as you notice, you said coloring coming back. You see the butterfly, and it's a gap in a snow dome. It's in the shape of the blood splat that appears on the badge from the very beginning. So there's all these callbacks.
Medium button, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So technically, this is brilliant. But the other thing as well is I love about this is because of the way he does the lines and everything. It's quite simple and clean in many places. It's just the expressions. Like it's never unclear unless they intend it's that way. It's never unclear what people are thinking, and that's not just primary for people in the forefront, like people in the background. Like he gives you can see there's characters in the background, and you can see that they've been given expressions as well. That they're not just sort of like, you can't really see these, so 2 dots and a mouth. It's like they've all got. He gives it attention throughout. Like you said, like he's a storyteller. Like everything in the panel I'm not saying means something, but like it's there as for a purpose, and so he's going to give it its due attention and due sort of like.
Look at the props and the settings, right? I mean,
yeah,
they're smoking different types of cigarettes and they never explain it. It's just there. They have those spark hydrants for electric vehicles. They never fully point you there and, hey, reader, look, everything is electric. Do you get that this is an alternate future where it's just there, but it's thought out. The fact that there are fire hydrants around that have electricity for electric vehicles that look similar to the vehicles that we both have now and had in the 80s, but like, it's just enough that and I think that's part of the reason why we like Alien and we like Star Wars, because there are these fully formed universes. You know, sometimes you watch a movie and you feel like the movie just exists in that 4, line screen that you're watching. But Star Wars is a fucking universe, right? Like when you watch Star Wars, you know that there are galaxies worth of ships and shit flying around. You feel it. You know that people have walked on the floors of the Millennium Falcon, I think this is the comic version of that,
Yeah, I agree. Like, yeah, this is a world. It's a lived-in world, isn't it? Like, everything feels authentic. Especially when you see the city, that New York corner. Life has existed between the panels on that corner, and I think all of that sort of because of that, and I think this is the skill of both the writer and the artist. But because of that, because you do feel that is a real world, because it has got that impact, that means at the end of this issue is more of that thing where you go, oh shit,
right?
Like that,
people just got killed, like something happened here.
Yeah, like and we live in a I hate to bring these back, but we have lived in a world now of like post like major tragedies, and so you do sort of go, you see the end of this now, and you go, yeah, like we've seen things like this, not just a sort of like the IRA bombing. We've seen like massive tragedies now, and you go, yeah, all right. I think we now live in a world where other parts of the world have lived in this since sort of the Second World War, but like we can now sort of go, yeah, no, that event I'm pretty sure would change the direction of history. Sure,
absolutely. I mean, it's literally a worldwide event, right?
So I think I'm going to sort of keep moving because you could talk about it for hours.
Can I say one more thing about the art?
Of course you can. Yeah.
You have the image here, right? Or you have the book there.
I got
right?
the book there. Yeah.
Can you go to the supplementals? Not supplemental, but the anecdotal stuff at the end of issue 11, where it's like a Rolling Stone interview of Ozymandias.
Yes.
Would you mind? Are you going to put this on YouTube?
Quite possibly. I'm not sure yet. Yeah. But what
put your image of that where he's standing there with the tunic over his shoulder?
Yeah.
Check this out, okay? Humble brag. That is the original art for that page.
That's impressive.
It's on my wall. I got it, and I actually got to tell Gibbons about it after interviewing him about Batman vs. Predator. And he was like, oh, cool. He's talking to me about it. And then he was like, I've talked to him multiple times. He tells the same story about him getting his like Grail page. But like the fact that even if you don't buy into Watchmen being as great as it is, you can't argue that it is historically important to the medium.
Yeah.
I also do relate and love that story. And I think it is every bit as important, like I said. And the fact that issue 11 is like probably my favorite issue from that. And I got art of it. I'd love to have a character shot. I kind of would like to have a regular interior panel page, but to actually have this, and there's like an ink wash on it with duo shade and stuff.
It's beautiful. It is. It's stunning. I mean, and that's
and Bubastis in there. And it's a little bit bigger than the cropped image in the page, but like, I mean, I have original watch. And I think you and I have talked about it before. I have a lot of original art.
Yes.
This is one of the 6 pieces I have on my wall. So it is up there. This is one of the ones no one ever asks about it, because how are you going to get that? How are you going to take that from me? Like no one's, you're not going to offer me a dollar amount. You're not going to offer me a page or something.
Yeah. That's like turning up and being like, that Monet you have over there, sort of like, how much would you be? No. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really excited that I own it. I've had it for like 5-6 years.
That is super awesome. And like I said, that's a Grail piece. Like that's one of those things you sort of search out.
That probably, if I was on a desert island with that issue, I'd probably cry thinking about this. Because if I was on a desert island, my wife would sell that shit immediately. Yes. Immediately. And she'd probably undersell.
A tenner. Of course, you can have it for a tenner.
Yeah.
It's only been around for a while. Right. So any last final thoughts on Watchmen 11?
If you haven't read it yet, get out there.
Yeah. Read the whole book. But yes, I think I'd be amazed if the people that are listening to this podcast, if they haven't read Watchmen.
Yeah, if you don't know.
There'll be some young whippersnappers.
Cool. Think about his decision, and if you think he did the right thing or not. And even if you're not talking to another person, talk to yourself about it for a minute and try to do both sides of the fence, because I think I can come up with pretty good arguments for both. I think that's like the beauty of comics is like, you could read it. I mean, any art, but you could read it. I could read it. We have different takes, but like you could philosophize about this shit, about this specific issue. I mean, all day. I could do a whole other show on that.
You say you can do the morality of the right and wrong of the decision, but there's also, as you made the great point of like, if you did make the decision to do it, could you bear the weight of that decision? You know, could you actually do that as a human being? Yeah, no, go check it out. Right, we are skipping forward a couple of decades to some Garth Ennis and Punisher Max. So tell us about Punisher Max. Why I chose Punisher Max number 1.
Okay, this is important, and it also has to do with my next choice too. I mentioned earlier, I didn't read comics till I was an adult. I was working on I Am Legend with Will Smith in like 2006, I think it was. And I was living in Los Angeles. I was working in special effects. I did practical effects. So we were building like puppets and monsters and shit and, makeup effects. And I flew with a team to New York with Watchmen in my hand. Mm-hmm. And I back and forth a while. And eventually they're like, hey, you're going to go there and you're going to live there for 3 months and just, head our operations there. Cool. Great. I got paid a lot to not have a lot to do and just walk around New York City. Found a great fucking comic book store called Midtown Comics. They have multiple satellites now. Huge store. And I went in with just fucking money to burn because I had money and I wasn't working a lot on set. So I'm looking around and there was a hardcover, or actually it was a trade paperback for this volume of Punisher Max, and it was the first 6 issues, I think. Yeah. And the trade cover was actually the cover for issue 2, I believe, where he's in a leather jacket in what looks like a men's room. Yeah, with all the red laser aimer dots all over him. And I was like, hello. And I pick up this book because I'd read comics as a kid, but never full series, really. Like just here or there. Like you're in the supermarket and I beg my dad for a book. And Punisher was always like I'm going to let you go with a message. You're lucky. I'm not going to kill you this time. Or, he'd shoot up a room of people, but like, it wasn't very violent per se, like what we're used to, especially now. But that cover said everything. And, it was a Tim Bradstreet cover. So I was like, okay, it was $10. $10 meant nothing to me in those days. I brought it home and it was a Marvel Max. And I didn't know what that was because I wasn't reading comics. Marvel Max, for those of you who don't know, is essentially Marvel's R-rated line. You get a little bit of nudity, you get lots of motherfuckers and blood and violence and guts galore, which suits Garth Ennis Punisher to a fucking T, right? So when I start reading this story, it opens with him graphically describing the park shooting where his family gets, massacred. And then he says, every night I go out and do the same thing. I try to make the world sane again. And there's this bitchin' splash of him with this almost like bird-like looking Punisher skull. And I'd seen different Punisher skulls through the year, but this was so different than the normal Punisher skull. It just made it that much more like, I don't know, real. Like I felt like he would have spray painted that shit on the shirt himself. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things is, one of the things to highlight with all this is up until this point, we'd had Punisher in like a black onesie,
superhero costume.
White
pajama
boots,
suit.
Yeah, white boots, white gloves. The skull, the bottom of the skull was became the belt became the teeth and all this other stuff.
Containers, yeah,
and all that stuff. So it was a superhero costume, and it was always fine. And you'd had I think the 90s had a couple of runs where the violence had been pushed, but it was always within that Marvel
safe. It was safe.
It was relatively safe.
Little candy coated, right? Disneyfied almost.
Exactly. This was the first time for me. I remember this. I remember this coming out. I was sort of re-entering comics around this time. I'd sort of been dabbling a little bit, and this is one of the things that again I came across at the comic shop, and you're like, ooh, open it, and you're like, fuck, this is like, yeah. But you say he doesn't wear a costume; it's a t-shirt or a bulletproof vest that has got the skull on. But then he is just wearing like combat boots or jeans or combat trousers and a leather jacket and gloves. Like, it's just a costume. Like, it's not a costume. It's just clothes that he has modified. Like,
he's wearing tactical shit. He puts that death's head on there for, I don't know that series ever specifically states why he puts the skull on there. Multiple series in the movie and everything give it different explanations. You don't need an explanation. It doesn't fucking matter. But I totally agree with you. I like my Punisher with, tactical gear on. I like him wearing gray cargo pants.
Yeah.
I like when he wears those like Lobo style gloves with the things folded back or just barehanded. And trench coats, you can never go wrong, but not really the most tactical garment, but like fucking who cares? I certainly like it better than the head to toe suit, the white and black suit. It makes more sense. It feels less silly and it feels more grounded. And he's in gritty New York City. And this book made me realize as a medium, holy shit, comics can talk to adults. Yeah. I knew that, but this is the first time that someone was like, hey, Matt Corrigan, who knows a lot about horror movies and action movies, and you have a certain taste and you have certain expectations. Check this out. And the first real scene of the book, he goes to a Mafia Don's birthday party. It's his 90th birthday.
It's 100th. And it's his 100th birthday party.
It's amazing. And it's this huge castle-esque New York looking house, in Long Island or something. And he's stalking the house as he's saying, all these great inner monologue things about how all these wise guys are here for the birthday. They're not even any guards. It takes me, everyone's inside. It takes me 10 minutes to set up, and then I go in too. And 10 minutes to set up. He literally walks in, shoots the Don in the head, and walks outside. And as he walks outside, he's saying 30 seconds for shock. And it shows all the mafia guys. Oh shit. Oh my God. 30 seconds to get pissed. We got to get him. 30 seconds to come outside. And that's all I need. And they run out and they're like, you motherfuckers. And there's like a half-page splash of him with an M60 just letting loose. And I remember on that page being like, this is the veteran army guy who knows how to kill people doing what he's supposed to be. This is what the Punisher's supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah.
So the next 8 pages are just him killing every fucking mafia guy in this building. And he's talking about only now, while spraying automatic fire into a human wall, do I feel anything like peace. And you're like, whoa. Yeah. Then he's got essentially he's made himself a little machine gun nest. And he says, some of these guys have seen too many movies. They're trying to flank me. And as he's explaining this, you see these mafia guys going around this bush to try to get behind him. And there's close-ups of their feet. And he says, most mafia goombas are just one part muscle, only good for shaking down people less than them. He said, aside from that, they're just children groping in the dark. And it shows a landmine. And then it says just little children groping in the dark. And then you turn the page and there's an explosion as all these guys go flying. And I just remember being like, how fucking deadly would he be? Like, if his job is killing mafia guys, there can't be a mafia guy alive that would stand a chance. He would have that set up. And, if you've read the Garth Ennis run, Garth Ennis does that. There's a lot of traps. There's a lot of tactical thinking of kill zones and stuff like that. And it just, this scene of him massacring an entire organization in one scene. And he says, I put another belt in the M60 and mow through the crowd, the dead bodies in the ground just to make sure that there are no survivors. And you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, he says, aims and he moans. So the moment he hears it, he's just like,
And it's like, if your family was killed and you had this vendetta that you were only going to kill bad guys, Wouldn't you kill all the bad? Like, what better way to do it than to kill every friggin' bad guy, right?
It's the efficiency of it, isn't it? It's just the sort of the pure efficiency. What I would say is like you say, that opening scene there, that opening sort of like couple of pages, because this is issue 1, right?
Yep.
And so the very, very first, called In the Beginning, and I'm not.
That's the story title.
Yeah. So I'm not going to, it's called In the Beginning, but it's actually more about an end, isn't it? Because it's about Micro's being sort of like recruited to try and bring it down. But the very first page is the tombstone for his wife, daughter, and son. And one of the things it clearly states very, very quick, or shows very, very quickly, is they all died in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
And this book was originally published, I think, 2005.
Yeah, early 2000s.
Yeah. So this first page instantly tells you, right, these people died in 76. He became the Punisher in the 70s. He's been doing this for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, and so I love the fact that, like, when you then go into it, like, he's not as often is depicted by, superheroes or all that sort of like peak 30 sort of age.
Forever 32 with
exactly.
great bills and live forever.
And so this is like a proper grizzled older dude. This guy's in his late 50s and all that sort of stuff. And I love the fact that, the art, we'll talk about the art shortly, but the fact that 30 years over, this incident of like him remembering the tortured face of his kids or his daughter, the sort of like, the look of fear and sort of bewilderment in his wife's eyes. And then when he talks about his son, like his son just drops. And he's desperately looking for like an entry wound. And he says, never found the entry wound. It went through his open mouth. And you're just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Like, you're like, okay, this book is not softballing anything in here.
No,
right?
No, this book is not messing around. And so and it shows like a younger looking Frank. And then it's just like, this is what he's looking to purge himself of. And it's like the fact this has burned him for 30 years. I mean, it never justifies him. It never sort of says that act, in some cases they've tried to sort of justify it, haven't you? He's out for revenge. He's always out for this. This book's like, in Ennis, I mean, if you read Born, you get more of it. But they're never trying to sort of like justify him. It's just like, no, that happened. And that's what sort of like instigated this.
Right.
And now he just sort of does this.
Well, Ennis specifically in Born and in other books kind of almost flat out says, let alone insinuates, that this incident kind of awakens the monster inside of him, right? He gets a taste for it in Vietnam, realizes he likes it and he's good at it. And this and multiple, even Jason Aaron in his later Punisher Max run, which they specifically say that part of Frank was looking for an excuse to live like this. So, but like, however you want to take it, you're right. And even in the couple pages after he talks about his family getting killed in the first couple pages of this issue, he says the shooters are killed, their targets were killed, his soldiers are killed, the guy who ordered the hit is killed.
Yeah.
And he says maybe hundreds, maybe thousands more, but still every night I go out and try to make the world sane again. Yeah. And it's like, I didn't really drop this at the beginning, but I have a show myself, the Launchpad podcast, with my forever roomie, Aaron McLean. And he's a huge fan of everything that we're talking about. He loves all this shit too. Punisher's his guy as well. And we have always said has not yet been a great Punisher movie. There's been one that's okay. We both are huge fans of the Dolph Lundgren. Yeah. The other two have tons of fucking problems with them, in my opinion. But we keep saying Punisher should be like Jaws. When you watch Jaws is not taking care of another shark. They're not giving you a reason why Jaws is doing what Jaws is doing. Jaws is a shark. It kills people to eat them and defends itself, and be's a shark. Yeah, that's what Punisher should be. You shouldn't be telling me why he's upset. You shouldn't be telling me who his relationships are. I mean, I understand to have contemporary American cinema or storytelling, you need some dialogue and stuff like that. But then you read an Ennis run where he doesn't really talk to most people. Like you have the Detective Soap that he talks to and most of that shit. But you can lift that out and still have the same thing. And I don't think any of us loved Soap as a character or foil or anything. You just have Punisher going in there like a shark, doing what sharks do and leaving. And that's, I mean, I guess I was going to say you can't read 100 issues of that, but I feel like I could. Maybe not in a day, but
no. But that's what the Ennis run is. I mean, the Ennis run, it's 62 issues for the max, and then you've got Bourne on top of it, and I think there's another sort of side issue, a sort of side collection. So he's easily over 70 issues. And
Ennis's Marvel Knights run is great too, even though that is not as bloody or on the nose violent. But I mean, I don't think the storytelling suffers, and I still think it's the same Frank. Like I think you could easily see that those are the same Punisher characters.
Yeah,
just one has less motherfuckers. Like that's
and
blood, that's it.
Yeah, and the Marvel Knights one gets to punch polar bears, which is fun for all involved. But no, the thing with this as well is, like you say, the problem with the Punisher is, like you say, compared to other superheroes, other heroes, is they are a protagonist. They're an aspirational character for the most part. Like, you know, even like Batman, you know, he dresses up as a bat. He's a billionaire dressed up as a bat, beats up people and whatever. You can make that into a story. Superman, Captain America, the MCU in particular, sort of like is driven by this idea of aspirational people. But the Punisher, you can't make. If you make him, like you say, the protagonist, they sort of have to make him redeemable. They have to make him think, but he's not. And that's why I say, when you have the comics and like even some of the other runs they've had have been good, but like they're constantly trying to make him almost human. They make him redeemable,
right?
Which is fine, but he's at his best when you're like, no, like you said, he's a shark. He's just a machine. Like it's like following the Terminator, but from the Terminator's point of view. Like,
right.
It doesn't make a great film.
Yeah. And you know, it's almost like you think I was going to say John Wick. Like you watch John Wick, and the first 15, 20 minutes they set up his life and what he has. It's taken away from him, and it turns him to revenge. If you were to have him multiple times throughout that movie talk to someone about the dog, or look at pictures of the dog, or watch videos of the dog. And like, we're laughing, but like, I can think of 3 movies off the top of my head that have your revenge character or your, you know, action-driven character stop the revenge for a minute to watch wedding video because they're trying to show us that this is you're like, first of all, you already fucking set that up in the first act. I get it. And you're stopping the kick-ass to show that I don't need that refresher, but you're right. I understand thematically and as a device what the storytellers are trying to do there. Punisher is not the character you need to do that. He's the last character I can think of that you need to do that with, right?
I agree. I think, you know, films have there are films that have given us a glimpse of what a Punisher film could be. You mentioned like John Wick. I think of like The Raid, Redemption or Dread. That thing of where you basically just set it up and you're like, are you ready? 45 minutes of violence.
Yeah. And I always say to Aaron, like, our guts are like just more fighting. But then you think of like the first 30 minutes of Revenge of the Sith, and it just gets mind numbing, right? You think of some of them, in my opinion, the Marvel Universe movies, the MCU, as well as like some of the Fast and Furious movies. They're kick-ass, but 20 minutes into the same chase scene, your brain and your eyes kind of wander off. And that's not your fault. That's the story's fault for not keeping it engaging. But I'm always like, you can't do, I mean, I want that. My gut wants that for the Punisher. But then I always say my eyes are bigger than my stomach. My buddy Aaron Rumi on the Launchpad podcast is like, no, fuck that. Give me an hour and 50 minutes of the Punisher and I'll take it. And I think he's right. I think I'd rather have that than the Netflix TV series, which I personally couldn't stand, where there's just so much of him sitting on a couch talking to people. And you're like, there should be zero of that.
The problem with this, John Bernthal could be the best Punisher.
Agreed.
I think he's awesome. But the amount of times like he becomes just a mopey sod where I'm just like, I'm bored of this episode now. Go and kill someone. Like you're boring.
He should never be drinking wine with someone's wife. Ever. 0 times.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? There are certain things I hate when they're sort of like, well, he hasn't developed as a character yet. That works in some cases, you know, where you're like, okay, yeah, he's going to reach that level where he is Batman, or he's going to reach that level where he is that character. The Punisher isn't that. The Punisher doesn't develop. He happened. Like, right. It was a switch. That's the point.
Right. If anything, he should just be more Punisher, right? Yes. It's like if a shark like studied its own habits and was like, wait, I could kill more things this way. And I feel like, to me, that's like the Punisher in the 90s that I read here and there, and now have gone back and read, but like read here and there, and then picking up this issue 1 of in the beginning. And I was just like, holy shit. Yeah. And he literally finishes that murder spree, and we watch him walk away through a security camera feed through other characters, you know, secondary characters who end up pushing the story later. But you don't feel an attachment with him as a character because he literally walks out of that scene and you're watching it. The fact that the writer and artist put it through you're watching over the shoulder of another character as they're looking through a security camera, you feel extra detachment from that character. He is a force of nature. And I was reeling, right? When I read that issue, I was like, yes, give me more.
Well, the thing is, I like that sort of force of nature. That's exactly what he is. One of the things I would say about the structure of this, and it's why Ennis is one of those ones again. Like there are times when he hits it and he hits it like hard, like when it's doing well, like it is phenomenal. Like, and I think this is one of those issues where, like, structurally, this is perfect for all intents and purposes. This issue is a short story of the Punisher.
Absolutely, yeah. Like it could be a pitch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It could be a pitch of something.
Yeah, this encapsulates everything. And so the Punisher part of it is just the Punisher being the Punisher. It's those periphery characters, those secondary characters that you say are setting up the rest of the plot. And it's the reveal at the end, which is then you're like, oh, cool. You know, it's Micro that seems to be coming back in to try and bring him down. That's what's taking me to the next issue. That's the one that goes, oh, cool, I want to see that. But everything the Punisher's done is like a short story. It's a small, like I say, encapsulation of him being him. And I love that. It's almost like a statement of intent from Garth Ennis, who's like, this is the shit I'm going to do with this story. So, you know, hold on. And I think it's really
great.
cool.
I read this before I read I probably dabbled in Garth Ennis stuff randomly before that, but I read Preacher after, and I read Preacher, I read Boys, which have their moments, but for me, Garth Ennis with free reign just gets like crazy sexual deviant way too fast and too often. And like, I'm not saying I'm the most prim and proper guy, but I'm pretty traditional. And it's like, I love the concept of the Boys until at least in the first like 20 issues, most of the things they were trying to turn on their head were like sexual tropes. It's like, oh, what if all of these guys were like orgy monsters? You're like, okay. And like, what if Batman and Robin were also gay? And you're like, okay. But it was like, what if these two also had dicks? And I was like, can it be anything other than just that? And I feel like Punisher was like, hey, you know, you can't make it all sexual. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna make it all violent. And it's like that fit. It just fit so perfectly.
Yeah, the thing I say about Garth Ennis is he's very anti-superhero. Like he doesn't want to write, and you know, I haven't read Reptilian yet, the Batman story he wrote, but weirdly, I agree with what you're saying. I find him more pointed, satirical, and sharp when he is working on an established character, like his Punisher Max stuff, his Marvel Knights. But also like his Constantine stuff, his Hellblazer stuff.
Right. Yep.
Is brilliant. You know, it's not sort of like you say, it's not sort of like, you know, dildos and cocaine spraying everywhere. Like
all the time. Right.
Yeah. It's kept within the constraints of what's going to be.
That's going to be his biography, right? Dildos and cocaine.
Yeah. Dildos and cocaine. The Garth Ennis story. So yeah, when he has got those restraints, like I feel he is much more surgical. And like I said, the Boys, I couldn't get through the first 2 volumes.
Same.
Because of that reason. Where I'm just like,
I got to the second volume, I was like, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm like, I get the point. I know what you're doing. I'm getting bored of it. But yeah, but this is where I think it's really good, because again, like he's able to explore and deconstruct something that I think up until this point, I think the Punisher had been one of those characters that had been sort of a little bit, people have been scared of it. Weirdly.
Sure, yeah.
As in, like, oh, we can't go too far because, you know, we're condoning gun violence and
right,
so on and so forth. And then this is where Garth Ennis is like, yeah, no, because you see him as a hero. Like, he's not the hero.
Right.
I want to show you that, like, he can be manipulated into doing good things. But, you know, going back to what we were saying before, to the end, to the, you know, the means justify the ends, you know, or the ends justify the means, even. Like, you know, like, in what is it? There's the people trafficking one story later on, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
In the arc, and you're sort of like, okay, he's doing good because he's saving these people. But then you watch like how many more people he kills across all that, and you're like, yeah, there's probably
he literally drugs a house full of people, like all bad guys, human traffickers, but they literally are passed out on a table, and he walks around shotgunning them. And you're like, if you as a human don't react slightly afraid of that, like, you could cheer him on. You could cheer him on and be like, hey, good, you're killing slavers. But you're also like, those are passed out people and you're shooting them with a shotgun. That's fucking violence. You know what I mean? Like, that's shake you to the core of violence. But that's that world. That's the Punisher in New York City doing that. You know, that makes sense. I don't know how you can not do that.
No, I agree. Because it's the thing, isn't it? Like you say, the Garth Ennis run is supposed to challenge you in that respect. Like, it's supposed to say to you, like, again, you know, linking this back to sort of Watchmen, you know, those people that cheer on Rorschach don't understand Rorschach. You know? Correct.
Right.
The people that are cheering on the Punisher don't understand the Punisher. And this is where Garth Ennis is sort of challenging you to say, yeah, you keep cheering for this guy.
It's okay to cheer for him, right? Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. But you could read this book. You could be happy that he's, you know, kicking Manucci's body back into the fire, you know?
Yeah, one of the things I would say, though, that's interesting, and this is a complete side tangent. I read a book recently. The use of the Punisher skull on...
Oh, I'm so happy you brought this up.
On police uniforms and military uniforms and stuff, apparently can be traced back to about this time. Sure. And so, you know, I don't think if Garth Ennis has ever commented on it, but there is this sort of notion of... Because this book sort of elevated him again, like the Punisher Max sort of like elevated it, sort of thing, an awareness of it. And so there is a suggestion that these books and the sort of that became around this time. So but again, that's people completely misunderstanding the intent. So what were you going to say about it?
Well, the Punisher, it's funny because I think you and I both poo-poo the white and black superhero Punisher outfit, but I just love that iconic skull shirt, and I'm proud to admit that I have a Punisher shirt collection of all different, you know, variations and models, some of which I've actually like had someone customize for me. I think last count, I was almost at 20 different. And I don't mean like slightly different. I mean like different iterations of it. I think it's so cool. I think, you know, when you read a book, and there's plenty of Garth Ennis books where he doesn't have the shirt, it doesn't feel like it's not him. But when you do have like a full page splash of him turning around with a shotgun and he's got the skull, you know, emblazoned, right? It just looks so fucking cool. But you're right. It is, you know, it's funny. And this is an interesting thing to, you know, a lot of people think about and talk about comic books as modern mythology. These are mythical characters that we can look up to or back away from, you know, as cautionary tales, as inspiring tales. I was going to say, yeah, I guess like, you know, cops or gun nuts or whoever could be behind John Wick too. John Wick doesn't have a symbol. There's nothing you can put on your window to show. I mean, not nothing, but you know what I mean? There's not something you can do to be like, hey, I love John Wick. But the Punisher, boom, you got that skull. Doesn't matter the design, doesn't matter anything, right?
Yeah, it's
pretty interesting.
No, it is interesting. They need that symbol, don't they, to sort of like to, you know, root behind and that sort of thing. And so I do find that interesting, that sort of thing. It always tends to be the bad guy, not the bad guys, but, you know, there's a certain type of people that do that.
Sure. You
know, you never sort of see sort of...
there's not a ton of Captain America ones. There's more Punisher ones.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. But even like, you know, you don't see like a bunch of sort of like people working for, you know, the United Nations or I don't know, some sort of like aid relief firm, with the on there, just everyone wearing the Green Lantern symbol. You know what I mean? Like no one, the sort of like these people doing good in the world never seem to co-opt a symbol. I don't, that's what I want to see.
That's because people at the fucking United Nations aren't reading comic books. They're like changing world policy, right? Like they're making sure that an Adrian Veidt doesn't fucking teleport a monster in the middle of a city. They're trying to keep that shit from going down.
Dude, maybe that's what's missing. Like world politics would be a lot simpler if they were all sat around going like, "Have you read the latest Detective Comics? Oh man, yeah."
That would be cool if you did that at the end of like the actual like real important political bullshit meeting.
Yeah.
Like, okay, 20 minutes to talk about comics. Did you guys see Moon Knight last night?
Yeah.
Yes. And like, can you imagine like across nations people talking about that? Oh,
yeah. See, that's it. Comics pop culture and nerddom, bringing people together. That'd be amazing.
Well, are we gonna jump to the next one? I want to say one more thing about the shirt.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
And this is a little bit of it's a huge self plug. What was your favorite Punisher movie or on screen Punisher? I guess I should say. Total, all given, not just looks, everything.
Put it this way: the only one I own on Blu-ray is the Dolph Lundgren one.
Fair. I own all of them. I even own 2 of the fucking Tom Jane one because I'm a completionist. I hate that one the most, but I agree. The Dolph Lundgren Punisher is my favorite, and it's baller. What's the one thing that it's missing? The logo. The shirt, right? So a couple years ago, 3 years ago, I was lucky enough to finagle an interview with him. So I sat down with Dolph Lundgren. Dolph Lundgren. Oh, dude,
I remember we got the podcast.
Yeah, we got to do the secret. For the Launchpad podcast, we have a very secret handshake. We got to do the handshake with him. He was awesome, super cool guy, super chill. He got the jokes about like that the Punisher and He-Man were not the best movies and stuff, but he was super cool. And the whole thing was, I was like, hey, I will buy you a Punisher shirt if you will take some pictures with us. And we sat down before the interview. He was like, let me see the pictures that you want to I wanted to recreate some famous comic book images of the Punisher with him. So I showed him a whole bunch of images that, I showed him like 12 and he picked 2. He said, I'll only do this if it doesn't look silly. And I said, that's the last thing we want. We want this to be bitching. So I got him a classic, plain Jane Punisher skull. And I brought a bunch of airsoft guns and we took a bunch of pictures of him next to this pool at this Beverly Hills hotel after the interview. And he had fun with it. He was doing cool. He's like, I was like, keep it. He's like, thanks. I'm gonna work out with it tomorrow. I was like, how fucking cool is that? But he chose the original Spider-Man cover where Punisher first appears, the yellow cover where he's holding the gun in Spider-Man. And then he did an image from Punisher Max, this series, issue 7, issue 9. It's Kitchen Irish, and it is the title splash of the page where shit starts going down in a bar, and it's Punisher turning around to shoot guys behind him.
Yes.
So we did this whole big Photoshop thing with him. He's in the shirt. We did this. The cover is him shooting at me in a Spider-Man shirt upside down in the pose. So I have that. And then the Kitchen Irish book, which is another great fucking story. That's Leandro Fernandez's art. He's turned around like this. We didn't have the right gun on the day, so I bought the correct looking shotgun that he's blasting guys with, and we changed the hands out, so it's my hand on Dolph Lundgren's body for that image. And if you go to our websites or if you look me up, you can find it. And he's shooting me and Aaron. So me and my roommate with the podcast, he's blowing us away. And it was like, that was like a life goal that I didn't know I thought I had, was to just get Dolph Lundgren in that Punisher shirt. And the coolest part is he picked those images. I own that original art of him turning around, the Leandro Fernandez from Kitchen Iris. So I actually have that page framed, and I also have Dolph Lundgren shooting me in the exact same.
It's awesome, man.
That's so cool.
There's not many people that turn up for interviews. Like, I mean, you must have got that thing where he's like, okay, we're gonna ask questions, and is there anything you don't want us to cover? And all the other kinds, and you're like, dude, got a t-shirt. And I got some Nerf.
Well, it was like, and it was months of him. Like, he kept being like, yes, let's do it, but we're going to Turkey to do a shoot for 2 months. And I was like, he's blowing me off. And then they came back and we're like, okay, you want to try it next month? We talk about dates. Oh, we're going to Bulgaria to shoot a movie for a week. And it like literally, but I was like, he can't be blowing me off because they keep contacting me back. And like, if the answer is no, tell me no. And I will never give up. If you tell me no, okay. But if you don't look me in the eye and say no, I will come after you.
Yeah.
And I kept coming, and I was talking to his assistant. And his assistant, like, he's like, bring all the stuff. He's not guaranteeing it, but we'll talk about it when you get here. So I was like, fuck. I ordered a shit ton of airsoft guns from specific images. And it was literally like I was tracking the UPS guy because not Dolph Lundgren, but his assistant called me the night before and was like, can you make it to this Beverly Hills hotel tomorrow? I was like, yes, but my fucking guns are going to be in transit. So I wasn't able to get those guns, but luckily I had other airsoft guns. But like...
It's awesome. That's awesome though. Like, you know, it makes me want to sort of turn up. Yeah, there'll be people like, you know, I would love to meet and be like, I've got this. Can we get some photos?
Yeah. As a kid, I always wanted you to wear this. Will you wear this? Yeah. And he's like, okay.
That's cool. Yeah, but Punisher t-shirt's fine. Turning up with sort of like, you know, bra and suspenders and talking to Bruce Campbell, that's a different story.
Yeah.
You know? One thing I was going to say, just about sort of the character, is the art. You want to mention on the artwork. I love the fact that like this is like craggy old.
It's Clint Eastwood. It literally is modeled after Clint Eastwood. And if you look, there are certain pictures that look
just like
Clint Eastwood. It was done on purpose because he's supposed to be in his 60s. And I don't know, that helps ground the story too, you know? And for me, this is like a desert island book because this is John Wick, where I won't watch a movie usually unless I see the start all the way. I'm not going to watch a scene of a movie.
Yeah.
I'd watch a scene of John Wick. I'd watch a scene of Terminator. I'd watch a scene of Punisher Max. So this is my popcorn movie on the desert island. It's not really very deep or layered like we're talking about Watchmen, but damn, if I'm in the mood for some
violence,
good action movie, baby.
Yeah, totally. Right, we will move on then. The final book in the stream that is Ultimate Spider-Man 131, which is a tie into Ultimatum. So go on and hit us with this one. This is a bit later on. This is the Ultimate Universe and Bendis doing Spider-Man.
This is my hard one to come up with for you. And this is the one I was hoping I would get to like make the game day play right now and figure out what I was going to talk about. But Spider-Man for me is probably the best hero. He's the one I aspire to most. Daredevil might be my favorite. I might relate more to Daredevil, but the guy who just took over writing on Amazing Spider-Man now, his name is Zeb Wells, and it's actually a buddy of mine. We had him on our show a while ago, and we were shooting the shit about different heroes, and he said, Spider-Man is the guy you aspire to be like. And even more so than Supes or Captain America, Spider-Man, he's got a girlfriend for the most part. He always tries to do the right thing. And if he gets knocked on his ass, he gets back up and does it. You know, he just tries harder. Even if it breaks his own heart, he does it. And even if it's a show, he does it with a smile. He does it with a joke. There's an innocence in Spider-Man. In almost any book, even the books where he's dark and gritty in the 80s, he's still if done well, he's still Spider-Man. And, you know, there's so much to, I can't think of a hero that's like him, you know what I mean? In that regard of just pure, he's pure. So I really wanted my last book to be a Spider-Man book. And again, whereas Ozymandias would kind of inspire me to do better, Spider-Man does that in a more subtle way. And have you seen No Way Home?
Yes. Yeah.
In No Way Home, there's a scene where Willem Dafoe looks at Tobey Maguire and he's like, Peter, how have you been? And Tobey Maguire, who I despise as an actor, choked me up by him saying, you know, I'm trying to be better. And I was like, fuck, that is a Spider-Man thing. There's an older, wiser Spider-Man thing to say. So, and I know a lot of Spider-Man books. I have Spider-Man books that literally make me cry when I read them. I can't read them without crying, but they break my heart. I can't bring that to the desert island. So I'm trying to think. In the issue before I picked, which is 130, a giant tidal wave wipes out New York City. And I mean, if you haven't read Ultimatum, the Ultimatum main storyline is pretty silly and not great. A lot of people don't like it. Nice art, whatever. I mean, come on, David Finch doing Magneto. Get out of here. Can't do cooler than that. But anyway, it wipes out New York. And if you guys aren't familiar with Ultimate Spider-Man, he's younger. He's in high school and perpetually like in high school. But there's, again, that innocence, that pureness. And I love the way Bendis writes him and his circle of friends. He's with Mary Jane. He's got Gwen. Aunt May knows he's Spider-Man. There is a clone Spider-Man that is essentially a female version of Peter, who also is like a Spider-Woman. And all these characters, I think, they're just so heartwarming. And I love that series. This wave hits and just fucking it's knocking buildings over. People are drowning. And in issue 130, Spider-Man is losing his mind. And he's like, oh my, literally swinging around going, oh my God, oh my God. And he's rescuing people and people are like, what happened? And he's like, I don't fucking know. And he's just scooping people up. And, you know, there's a cab that's, you know, drowning in the water. He pulls the cab up into a web. He takes a woman onto a roof. He goes back to the cab to get the cab driver. And we don't see it, but the cab driver's dead. And Spider-Man just sits down defeated in the web and is crying. And I'm like, this is a teenage boy who we've watched fight Green Goblin and all this other shit. How would you deal with a 9/11 type situation, right? And I like, even though the Ultimatum storyline, blah, 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 tidal wave hits New York City. And I was like, shit, this is like a heartfelt issue. And you think it looks like it's just this event, the Marvel event. But like, it hit me. The issue ends, issue 131. It's got a gray, Ultimate Incredible Hulk. Looks like he's about to smash Spider-Man. So I was like, oh, are we just back to normal superhero bullshit now? The issue starts with J. Jonah Jameson. And him, Ben Urich, and his crew are in a satellite office. And he is complaining to Robbie, I vilified Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a hero all these years. And then you turn the page, and there's a double-page splash of J. Jonah Jameson alone in a conference room. And you're in the conference room with him. And you're looking out at a corner view of this building. And New York City is just literally underwater. Yeah. There's cabs and bodies floating, and there's Spider-Man swinging down and grabbing a woman. And it is so fucking stunning. Like, again, I actually own that double page splash after years of hounding and getting it. But like, it to me, I've never cared about J. Jonah Jameson until that moment. I now, every time I see or read J. Jonah Jameson, I think about that. I think that somewhere in that character's timeline, that's going to happen. And that tidal wave is almost going to crush him into realizing that he vilified this almost angelic figure, right? And I'm like, shit. The rest of that issue is then Spider-Man, he meets the Hulk, and all we know in the Ultimate Universe about the Hulk is he's a monster. And Spider-Man is terrified that he's going to smash him. But Spider-Man keeps his cool and is like, Hulk, I'm your friend. We need to help these people. And he kind of like coaches Hulk almost like an insolent child, or like a child that has some sort of special needs. He almost coddles Hulk into helping rescue people, into doing his thunderclap to knock out fires of buildings. And Spider-Man is terrified of not only whatever is happening in this ultimatum scenario, but now he's got the Hulk, who at most is I don't know, like a tumultuous ally. Like, maybe this is okay, or maybe he will smash.
It can turn on a dime. People. It always feels like it could turn on a dime.
And Spider-Man knows that. And reading Bendis' writing, you're like, this kid is now scared shitless. But the last issue, which I actually think is a stronger issue, 130, he's petrified and he's losing it. In 131, he kind of gets his shit together to where he even finds dead Matt Murdock and holds his body and is like, fuck. Okay, I have to move on. I have to keep saving these people. And I just think that's fantastic. And then at the end, the Hulk turns back into the Bruce Banner. looks around, immediately thinks he did that.
Yeah.
You know, the ultimatum shit, turns back into the Hulk and then tries to smash Spider-Man. Spider-Man swings almost to Doctor Strange's sanctum and sees there's like a car in the middle of it and all these demons popping out. And that's how the episode, this issue ends. And I remember it's a very Spider-Man issue because there's like 4 or 5 huge things, but this emotional moment with JJJ at the beginning, and then Spider-Man being like, okay, New York City has been nuked. All I know is that I can save some of these people. And now I have a monster here who might help me. And I just like, that's Spider-Man. And Spider-Man's making his jokes and doing his best and trying to do that. And to me, that's like, not only is that my favorite character, but when I'm on a desert island and I'm whining about whatever bullshit is happening to me, I'm like, okay, if this fucking fake 16-year-old kid that's not real can survive a giant, fake wave and a giant fake monster, I can open this coconut or whatever else I'm trying to do, So
I can make fire.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it's a fantastic issue. Like I said, the images are great. That splash page, as you say, sort of shows. And it's so sort of the use of space in it is right, so sparse, but so much is going on. Like you see, it's a massive conference room and just J. Jonah Jameson in that corner, and then it's underwater, and I'm going like, geez, how's that glass holding up against that? But
right,
like,
yeah. It's a comic book. It's a comic book.
No, yeah, but I can. But that's there's a moment of fear, but then you see Spider-Man is also saving this woman, and that's what's the sort of like is absorbing his attention. And so I love that. That sort of like the moment of terror is actually, he's not even looking at it going like, these windows are about to smash. He's looking and seeing Spider-Man do his thing. And I really enjoyed that. The other side of that though as well is, I say, with the Hulk, is you sort of you mentioned like he returns to Bruce Banner because he calms him down. Like he actually like the thing is like Spider-Man calms Hulk down and he returns to Banner. And as you say, like Banner's instant response is like, did I do this? Like, what have I done? And he turns to Spider-Man. He's like, "You've got to kill me." And Spider-Man's like, "Yeah, like, no, I can't do that."
that's literally the opposite of what I do.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. And it's actually his anger at not being killed that drives him back to becoming the Hulk, and he becomes Rage Hulk again. And I like that. Like the sort of, again, this hit of like, like it's not Spider-Man, but like this thing of Banner, this sort of desperation of like, look, I'm sick and tired of doing this. Like, someone's got to kill me. And it being Spider-Man, who's like it's like the last person that's going to do, possibly could, I don't know, because I don't know how sort of strong they've leveled up Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe, but like, it's that moment he's like, no, like, that's not going to happen.
And it's like, and this is why I love comic book. I mean, any art, but like comic books is because that's your takeaway from that literal moment of the comic. Mine is, imagine you're this teenage boy. You've now saved a bunch of people, but seen a shit ton of dead bodies. You're in this cataclysmic event that at this point, Xavier has now beamed into your brain and told you it was Magneto, but you don't really know what that means. Yeah. You don't know what has happened or what will happen. All you know is it is in your fucking DNA to save as many people as you can. Now you have the Hulk. You've now coddled him and tricked him into helping you, but you're always waiting. Now you've chilled him out to the point where he's Bruce Banner. My first thought would be, oh God, thank God I don't have to deal with that anymore. Then all of a sudden in 30 seconds, that escalates back into the Hulk and you can't control him.
Yep.
And that's that old Parker luck, right? Of like, okay, good. I calmed that situation down. I can focus on this. Now you're the Hulk in destroy mode. And then he swings away into Doctor Strange's fucking house blowing up with demons, which then they start to fight the next issue. But like, it's just that thing of like, what could go wrong now? And then it does. And just Spider-Man as a character, Peter Parker just takes it on the chin and just keeps going. And to me, this issue, that's what that's about.
Yes.
And that's the message that I take from that when I read that. And I think my scared ass would need that on a desert island.
It's a good message to be having. Like, yeah, just keep on going. Like, like you say, it's that thing, isn't it, of the cliche, but it's true. It's sort of like, you're going to get knocked down, but you've got to get back up again. Like, you've got to keep going. The world won't stop for you, and it ain't going to stop for Peter Parker. So you've got to stand up and keep going. The bit where he finds Daredevil, and it again is it's a moment, like sort of like say, and I like the fact that you make a really good point of it's not like with Bendis, I know he sometimes sort of he sort of decompresses these things and they become quite long-winded. But it's not like, in some cases, I'm sure they'd have like a whole issue of them dealing with the death of,
sure,
with someone as sort of substantial as Daredevil. But it's not like it's literally a couple of panels, because it's like at this moment, this is the least of this
right.
Is the,
we've got other
least,
shit going on.
Yeah, this is the least shitty thing to be going on. So I will deal with this later, and it moves on. And I think, as you say, that sort of speaks volumes. In that when the death of Daredevil, which is a major character, is just passed over in a couple of panels, and you're like, oh, okay, that really makes me realize how sort of like dire everything else is. So it is good. It's an interesting issue,
and I love that scene too, because I the Ultimate Spider-Man was no joke. Another book that I picked up in Midtown Comics, maybe even the same day as I picked up Punisher Max, where I was like, this looks like it was the Bagley splashy covers. Yeah. I was like, this looks like a fun Spider-Man book to just read through. And I was instantly hooked. And throughout that series, and I love that series, Daredevil pops up a couple times, but even though we know Bendis loves Daredevil, he doesn't focus on him a lot. And there's one or two times where Daredevil does something where he's kind of, doing something over Spider-Man's head. He's kind of doing something where he's like, hey, kid, I'll take care of this. And at one point, I think Daredevil goes to his school or something like that and somehow nudges Parker, hey, come up to the roof. Something like that. But it's like he crosses the civilian line. And Peter Spider-Man gets in his face and he's like, if you do that again, there will be problems. And you're like, Peter Parker knows that Daredevil's an adult. They're drawn that way. Yeah. But the fact that he's like, that crosses the line, pal. I thought that was great. And they do butt heads a couple times. And in that issue that we're talking about, 131, as Peter Spider-Man's holding Daredevil, he says, we didn't always see eye to eye. We butted heads a lot, but I respected him a lot. And I think what 16, 17-year-old has that sort of wherewithal, but we're in a comic book, right? The fact that in the middle of that, he did have his moment to grieve. He did say, we're professional friends, I guess you could call it. But I got to put you down now and I got to go save people and deal with the Incredible Hulk. It's like, it really is one of those moments. Like it's the opposite of Superman's death, where there's issues and issues and issues dealing with it. Like you said, we got a couple panels and then we got to move on, man. And I think that's really, again, that's Bendis's writing. And I think Bendis loves that character. And I think that makes a difference. Like anyone telling you the story, if they care about the story, you're inclined to care more about it and the characters. And I think that's a great example of it. And that scene, you could shed that one single tear, especially if you're a Daredevil fan. I told you guys, Daredevil, I love him, but that's not what we're here for,
No, it's a side piece, but it's beautifully done. It is so well done. But it is a good issue. I mean, it's an interesting, it's an interesting insert issue as well. Insert is in like middle issue. Like I don't know I read this cold. I didn't read
just by itself.
Yeah, didn't read 130.
Oh.
Didn't read 132. Sometimes if I get the chance to do that, because obviously that's what is going to be on the desert island. I'm not going to have 130. I'm not going to have 130.
Sure, yeah.
So if I don't know it, I like to just read that issue. Which I couldn't, obviously with Watchmen, I've read it a number of times. Punisher Max, I've read it a number of times. So this one I like when I can pick it up and go, I go into this cold. Like I know nothing about this issue. So to open it up and I'm like, oh, London, New York's been flooded by this tidal wave, and you're getting the information through. And so this is one of those issues where one of the ones that's on the recent ones a while back was an Incredible Hulk issue from the sort of the one of the big ones. I forget the name of the writer, but it was yes, thank you.
John Byrne. Yeah, those are
Pete David one. And I read that and I was like, I want to read more of this.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to know more about this. Like it's sort of like it hasn't spoiled anything, but I can go and I'd love to read more. And this was another one where I read this and I was like, damn it, this is wet my appetite. No, it's just,
Yeah.
I now have 130 issues to read to catch up to
Oh,
this
yeah.
one.
Just
Yeah,
it's a great series, and it's a great jumping on point. Like for me, I do programs in elementary schools and stuff. We're bringing comics in. That's one of my go-tos because it is accessible, and it's who in either of our countries, who doesn't know about Spider-Man?
Yeah, exactly.
My mom can tell you a little bit about Spider-Man, certainly not the nuances, certainly not any one storyline, but she knows about him. This story, I think, is almost like, if you guys don't know the Ultimate Universe is a little different than Marvel's main universe. Different characters are different secret identities are different. People get their powers different ways. People die or live different ways. But it's a lot of the essentials are still there, a lot of the essential elements. And I feel like this one really boiled it down. If you don't care about the continuity of regular Spider-Man, if you start with Ultimate Spider-Man and just get into it, it's just a fantastic story. But I got to tell you, dude, you need to read at least 130 because 131 will hit you harder because you do see him losing his shit in 130. And then in 131, you see he pulls on his big boy pants and is like, okay, I had my freak out. I got to get this done now. And it's just, wow. It's like, it's Spider-Man. It's Spider-Man for me. There's 100 books I could tell you that is that. But this is the one I guess I'm going to bring to the island.
No, that's great because I think it's that standing up and carrying on, isn't it? Going through adversity because we all make, mistakes happen, shit happens. You've got to keep working through it because the world ain't going to stop for you. So
neither is the Hulk.
yeah. And it's a great issue, and I think it will. I'm definitely going to try 130 at least. But then there is that I am that temptation. Having said that, I am looking at my wall to read over there. And I'm like, I'll get to it at some point in my 70s.
Right. Yeah. When I retire. Yeah. I hear that.
But anyway, any final thoughts on 130 to 131?
It's a standout for me, but there's a lot of standouts for that whole run. But like I said, at the beginning of this episode, I lost sleep over this, man. I thought I must have read another 5 issues of different books being like, is this the one? Maybe put it in the maybe pile, and I really tried to think about without cheating and picking stuff that was like how to make shelter, how to fashion a radio out of coconuts or whatever comic book. I wanted to pick ones that I would actually be, I'm glad I crashed with this on the boat. And these 3, I stand by them very hard. And I think this is a great Spidey issue. The Punisher one is a great Punisher issue. And Watchmen, you really can't just read one of the 12 if you don't know the 12. But whereas I feel like the Punisher issue I picked in the Spider-Man, you could read that as a standalone.
Definitely.
One starts a story, one's in the middle of a story, but it tells you're there. It's a self-contained adventure.
But both of those, if you were to sort of start with, if you started your comic book career with Watchmen issue 11,
Watchmen 11.
I think you're jumping the gun slightly. That might even put people off. That's like saying sort of like, you can learn to read. That's fantastic. Here's Tolstoy.
Yeah, right. You ever watch a movie or a TV show that you think is at the beginning, but then you're like, this is not the first episode, right?
Yeah.
Like I've done that before. Remember VHS movies that were like long, like The Godfather, they'd have 2 tapes. You ever put tape 2 in by accident first? I feel like reading issue 11 of Watchmen before reading any other comics would be like that, but for an entire medium, right?
Yeah.
You'd be like, is this how it all is? What the fuck is going on?
Yeah. Everyone's like, no, they're all this good. They're all up there.
You see the butterfly? Look at that.
Yeah. They all have this level of metaphor and theme.
Oh my God.
But yeah, it is a good issue. It's if you were to read it first, it does spoil a lot. You need to read the whole book. But if you know it is a fantastic issue. Yeah. But I agree. I think that's sort of the opening issue of Punisher acts, as I said, like almost as a one shot. Like, you get the tease and there's some stuff for what the ongoing story is going to be, but it acts as a fantastic entry point to the character. But more than anything, I always think back to, I think it was like a Stan Leeism, but that's sort of like every issue. I think others have said it as well, but every issue could be someone's first issue of a comic.
Yeah, right.
And you're right. I think 131 or Punisher Max #1 could easily be someone's first comic, and you're like, right. If you had that person, you were like, oh, you were going to dig this. Like, I don't really read comics. You go, all right, well, you're going to dig this. Like, try this. And I think you could give those sort of, and hopefully it would get people onto that sort of journey.
We can't be friends if you're not. If you read those books and are like, never mind, I'm like, delete from contacts list.
Yeah. Well, it was nice to meet you. Moving on. Yeah,
right. Have fun with your life.
Yeah. But yeah, I think so. I agree. So, I will definitely sort of at some point in my reading career, get into Ultimate Spider-Man, but we shall see. But I've the other two I love. I love Punisher Max. I think it's a great run.
At least do Ultimate Spider-Man 130.
Oh,
just do that one. Give me those 20. Give me those 22 pages in the next week or so, just to buttress the two pieces together. Then you could do the run whenever you want to do the run, but at least give it 130.
I will. I will jump on Amazon tomorrow and get it on the now awful user interface that is Comixology.
For this episode, I just refreshed that to make that happen. And I was like, what did you do?
Yeah.
Why are you fixing stuff that's not broken?
Well, they were breaking stuff in order to... I'm not going to go into it. It was rather frustrating. I can't subscribe to anything on Comixology anymore outside the US. I have to buy if I was going to use it, I have to buy every issue individually. It's very frustrating.
What?
Yep. So all my pull list just disappeared overnight. So I get to keep all my old issues that I've got digitally, but yeah, I've gone back to physical for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame you. I only do Comixology and Marvel Unlimited because of how much I was traveling. It's easier and it's cheaper, but I would much rather hold a book. And I almost always end up buying anything I like a little bit digital. I'll buy it in a book because I want to hold it. I want to have it in my hand.
Yeah, and I like to have certain things on the shelf and all that kind of thing. Anyway, that's complete tangent for
another podcast.
But I will, I've had now one of the roomies of the Launchpad podcast. I will at some point, I've got to get Aaron on to do his stories. I'll be interested to see what books he would pick as well at some point.
I would be interested too. I'm sure he's going to listen to this, and I can't wait to listen to his. Can I give us a little plug? Tell everyone where to find
Go for it. Exactly. Yeah. Where can they find you?
So we are the Launchpad Podcast. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us anywhere where there's podcasts. It's the Launchpad Podcast. Our website is launchpadpodcast.com, launchpadpod.com. And all of our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter is Launchpad Pod.
Yeah. There'll be a link
hit us up there. And if you like Scott's stuff, 20th Century Geek is just fantastic. We listen to you. Scott has done a bunch of art for us before for multiple different things. We've been podcasting friends and nerd friends for a while and just taking nerdy trips together. So if you like his stuff, come check our stuff out. I know our guys love your stuff too. So keep cross-pollination up.
Anyone who sort of has enjoyed anything, this is just me picking up, finding random people to. But if you want to go sit and listen to what Matt and Aaron have done, it's awesome. Like some of your conversations and the tangents you go on.
Yeah, you think you hit a tangent before.
Yeah.
Whoa. Some of them you don't want your mom to listen to. Some of them your mom will probably laugh at.
Yeah. Yeah. But make sure you've listened to it first. Don't dip in and test that theory.
Yeah, that's a fair warning. I don't think we're very vulgar or anything, but we do talk about interesting pizza toppings from time to time, and that is not family friendly.
Yeah. But yeah, I love your podcast. It's accompanying me on many a commute.
I appreciate that. That means a lot, man, because your stuff, and we're nerd brothers from, I was gonna say other mothers, but different countries.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's a nerd community that just around the world, and that's what I love. That's what I was
cool. It's awesome.
Yeah, and as you say, you are going to be contributing. You are contributing to the book, the Moon Knight book that we're working on at the moment. It's coming together. I'm editing that, which is sometimes fun, mostly fun, and sometimes it's sort of like okay,
it's work. It's nerd. I call it nerd work. It's still work, but
it is.
Yeah, every once in a while I start complaining. I'm like, dude, you had to read 20 comics for work. Like, chill out.
That's it. I actually got to a point. I was reading quite a lot of comics today, and I was like, I'm kind of bored of doing this. And then I caught myself, and I was like, shut up.
Yeah.
Fucking complained about reading comics. Anyway, we should wrap up. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you do enjoy this, do go check out the Launchpad Pod. You will not be sorry. It's fantastic. But if you like what we're doing, leave a review. Go onto your podcast catcher and all over the place. go on there, 4 stars, 5 stars. Doesn't matter. Any feedback, we appreciate it all. But if you really like what we're doing, we have got the Patreon. It's www.patreon.com/20cg media. And we're on there doing all kinds of bits and pieces. One of the things I'm doing there with my other podcast partner from the other Stories Out of Time and Space is we are going through the Twilight Zone episode by episode. Me and Julian Darius analysing and talking about every episode of the Twilight Zone. And that's been a real blast. Go check that out. There'll be a link down below. And there will be a link down to podcast launchpadpod.com, so go check out those guys as well. But Matt, it's been an absolute blast having you on. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, dude, I thought that was gonna like be long, but we were on for a while, but that felt fast. I could do that. I would go on a desert island with you anytime, man.
Yeah, man, we will. You'll be back, and I'm definitely gonna get Aaron on as well. So get the pair. I want, I mean, like that sort of the deluxe twin pack. I want them both,
so we can make fun and rip each other's shit apart. Yeah,
yeah, that's it. Well, you come on here, talk about that, and then you do your podcast where you basically criticize each other's books, and then I can sit back and listen to that.
I'm on. Right. We'll do it. I'll get them on board.
Excellent. All right, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show, and I shall talk to you again soon.